Hey everybody, TBC here. Now, VELIOUS is only a few short days away on the Oakwynd server from launching, so I put together a video, a VELIOUS primer on things you absolutely need to know before the launch of VELIOUS. Now, whether you're new to the TLPs and Everquest or you're a returning player, I wanted to put together a really good guide so you know what to expect come VELIOUS. But before we get into the video, as always, I want to give a huge shout out to our channel members. Thank you so much for your continued support. It really is appreciated. If you're interested in becoming a member, click on the button down below. Other great ways to support the channel, hitting that like, subscribe, and of course leaving any comments you have down below. Again, very much appreciated. Scars of VELIOUS launched back in December of 2000, just in time for the holiday season, and when the expansion launched it came with 19 zones, though a few were added later, such as the Warrens before Oakwynd launched, and it was primarily aimed at a higher level player base, ideally those like level 30 and above, and it opened up a whole new continent to go out and explore, along with new races, new factions, lots of new raids and new leveling paths, new dungeons, and a whole bunch of new quests. And it's generally been very well received by the player base. A lot of players do look fondly back on the Scars of VELIOUS. It holds a lot of nostalgia for players and is generally considered the last expansion of what we call classic Everquest, and it's where P99 stops. So what I'm going to bring to you over the next week is a video every day looking at some of the high level major things that you need to know about VELIOUS. And what we'll be looking at is a very kind of high level overview of the lore, because I actually like the lore of VELIOUS, and I think it's really the first Everquest expansion that I actually kind of get into it just a little bit more, even though I'm totally not a lorehound. Second, we're going to look at some of the zones, geography and how to get around. We're going to look at the factions that plays out and the races that there are in VELIOUS. Now we're going to look very high level at the raids, the quests, and finally some of the loot and gear that you can get. So I'm going to have to do this over separate videos. So if I try to put it into one, it'll be way too long. So I'll be bringing you a video. I'm going to aim every day until VELIOUS launches. Now for myself, in terms of VELIOUS, I've played it several times back in the day. On in the year 2000 I raided through Temple of Vishan. Definitely remember doing that in an EU guild, and more recently played through it on Finny, Mangler, Mischief, Aradun, you name it, I've gone through it, and like I said, it is one that I fondly look back on. So today, like I said, the first video, I think to truly appreciate the Scars of VELIOUS, you need to understand some of the lore behind the expansion that revolves around the continent of VELIOUS, which home to some powerful dragon factions. It introduces the Coldain, the ever enigmatic dwarven clan, and we'll dive into the rich narrative that drives this expansion and the impact it has on Narath. Now, at the heart of VELIOUS's lore are the very mighty dragons. Early classic Everquest wouldn't be Everquest if it didn't have dragons, and this will be the last time we see them for a little while. So this expansion kind of revolves around the bitter conflict that exists between the Claws of Veeshan, the Giants, the Cromrith and the Cromzek, and of course the ever mysterious Coldain that live deep down in Thurgodim. Now, how the content came about, of course, if you don't know, the mighty dragon Vishan, a huge crystalline dragon, marked Narath with her claws. And if you ever go to Western Waste, these big crevices, you will see that they're kind of in a line, and that's supposed to be her claws. So it kind of gives you the scale and the size of this dragon. It must have been absolutely massive to leave such marks on. And what Vishan did, she blasted through, she created all the ice and left her brood on VELIOUS to grow, and that kicked off the Age of Scale. Now these dragons grew, they got older, and they formed the Claws of Veeshan, who rule over dragons of VELIOUS and beyond to this day. Now during this time is when all the other gods created the races, and that's like a 50-hour video in and of itself, so I'm not going to dive in that for too much. But some of the dragons did split off from the main Claws of Veeshan to form the Ring of Scale, and that's what you primarily see in Kunark. Now, the dragons, they make their home and their city in Skyshrine, but what they also have is the Temple of Vishan. Now, the Temple of Vishan, it's not like the city. This is supposed to be the off-limits, the holy site for all of dragonkind across Narath. And you're going to see that when you zone in, and there's pictures of Vox and Nagi on the wall. It's guarded by Sontalak, and inside it has the strongest dragons in all of Narath kind of living here. Now, when you come into the zone, there's basically 3 wings. You've got the West Wing, the Hall of Relics, which is overseen by Leninar, I always get that name wrong. The Keeper, and again the Keeper, because they keep items in the West Wing, it's supposed to be where they keep their most sacred and the most powerful items, and it's mostly guarded by many worms and drakes. And then you have the East Wing, which is the halls of testing, and that is supposed to be kind of like the test realm for those to prove their worth to dragonkind. And to do that, they have to kill the dragon Dozikar, and Dozikar is a cursed dragon. As punishment is to be defeated by the lesser races of Narath like me and you. And then to the north Temple of Vishan. Firstly, it's guarded by Arianar, who's a great big massive dragon, and you have to kill loads of little drakes first and throughout your time in this. And this area is actually off limits to all, whether you are on Dragon Faction or not. They don't want any intruders or interlopers coming through their zone, and that's where you will find the most powerful of dragons, from Feshlak, the Garn, Vim, and Kedoikan. And then at the back of the zone you've got the Elder Dragons. Get those down, and that's when you get to meet Vulak, the Lord of the Temple of Vishan. Now, turning to the Giants, we have Ralzek, who created the Giants kind of in his own image. One of the other gods, Praxis, didn't like all these giants and made a big storm. All the giants ended up fleeing, and some of them ended up on VELIOUS. And that's where we have the Gromrith, who established themselves a home in Eastern Waste. And the Kromzek, like I say, the other faction of giants, and it was the Kromzek, Ralzek's favourites, who established their home in the city of Kael'drakel. Now, obviously, the dragons didn't like the giants coming into the Great Scars and making their city, and Kael'drakel is home, and it's kind of like a trading post for these giants who are spread out all across VELIOUS, and they come to the city to sell their wares. And it's very much a very large zone for a city, and it's supposed to be like there's roads kind of going through it, and if you go through the zone, it does connect one side of VELIOUS to the other. And inside the city, it's very much has separate districts. You got the north, which is kind of like the temples, those that worship Ralzek, and the south leads to like the castle area where King Tormax lives. And as for King Tormax, he is the king of the giants and rules over both the different factions, the Kromzek and the Kromrith, and he really doesn't like dragons and wants them all to be destroyed. And in fact, he does sit upon a throne of a dragon's skull, Haskara, the mate of Yellowknife, so probably not going to be making friends anytime soon. He also doesn't like the dwarves, pretty much just as bad as the dragons. Indeed, it was Tormax that killed the previous Dane False Reaver the Third during the Great War. And moving on to the Coldain, I mentioned earlier that there were a bunch of dwarves that had been travelling, and they were blown off course and ended up on Velious completely by accident. But the dwarves, being adventurous and sensing the opportunity on a new continent with vast riches, decided to set up home and do some exploring, and they were led by a dwarf of the name of Coldain. Now this dwarf would lead them to an unassuming patch of rocks, and they started digging, and that's where they found a whole ton of crystals and what we now know is the city of Crystal Caverns. Now this is fairly close to the areas where the giants live, and as you can imagine, the giants and the dwarves decided, yeah, you know what, we both want this land, and started kind of a war. Giants, innumerous almost, would throw a band after band against Coldain and the dwarves, until eventually they realised that they would have to leave. There's no way they could stand. Only Coldain and a few dwarves stuck behind to guard the Crystal Caverns, the rest fleeing and eventually setting up the city of Thurgodim. And over time, these dwarves have kind of developed their own identity. No longer are they the same as the dwarves of Caladim, not by a long way. Their physical appearance has been altered as well, mainly from the exposure to Velium. So they're very much their own race now, very distinct from the dwarves we know from Phaedra. And their city, it's not always had an easy run. They've had to fend off giant attacks time and time again. They've had to rebuild parts of the city, every time making it stronger. Now the dwarves, their main enemy is the giants. They don't much care or have much actually interaction with the dragons, and maybe the dragons just see them as being fairly insignificant given their size, focusing instead on the giants. Either way, I'm a firm believer that the Dane must be slain for the peace to be maintained. Now, there's so much lore in Velious that there's just no way I could cover all of it, and not even touched on things like Velcator and his labyrinth, Simon's Grotto, Dragon Necropolis, Tower of Frozen Shadow. Really even look too much at what's going on and why Skyshrine is such a maze. Yet there's just so much lore filled in this expansion. But there's one I'm going to mention. It's one that's actually not my favourite story, and I don't know, maybe I've just been burnt out from how it's gone on previous TLPs, but that is that of the Sleeper Keraphim. Now, Keraphim, the story, it's been done time and time again, but in a nutshell, Keraphim is a relatively young, or was a relatively young dragon, crystal dragon, and was the sun polar opposite, so that's why they made a crystalline dragon. Now this dragon was bloodthirsty, it was crazy, nothing could satisfy its thirst for blood, Keraphim, but it quickly rose up the ranks among the Claws of Veeshan for being so strong and winning victory after victory. But alas, it became too much, and Keraphim had to be imprisoned in what is now the Sleeper's Tomb. Now the Sleeper's Tomb, guarded by the warders who hold a vigil over Keraphim, making sure he stays asleep and is not left to go on a rampage, because if he does wake up, I suspect he won't be very happy. Now we all know what happens there because that script has played out on every single server. Do not get excited about it. You probably won't see it. It will probably be woken up within 24 hours of the server opening. So take that as you will. And the script in fact is broken. It doesn't work. Kerfin used to go on a rampage across VELIOUS. That doesn't happen anymore. It goes to the zone line and poofs, and that's it. Done. It's not my favorite zone. It's not my favorite story out of VELIOUS. What's going on with the Coldain, and much more intriguing than the sleeper, in my opinion. So there you have it. There's my idiot's guide to the lore of Scars of VELIOUS. And I said I'm not a lore hound at all, but I do kind of like it, what's going on in VELIOUS, and I do find it a little bit interesting, as well as the glorious art that came with VELIOUS as well. It's really good expansion, and I hope you found this kind of useful, especially if you've never played through before. Let me know down in the comments below. Have I butchered it? Did I miss a load? I'd be really interested to kind of hear. It was really kind of one of my first ever deep dives into any kind of lore really beyond surface level in this game. I mean, I've never even read the text that flies through when you kill Quorm, because it races through at rocket speed. But let me know. I'll be excited to hear from you. Lots of videos coming up. Like I said, I'm pumping out a lot of videos over the next few days to get you primed for VELIOUS, so make sure to keep an eye out for them, and the best way to do that is hit that subscribe button down below, and that will let you know when the next video comes out. Beside that, I am the Brick Canuck, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.